right. Hi, I am attorney James Betzold. I'm a practicing immigration attorney. If you're joining us from Bella University, welcome. We've got a lot to go over. There is a new form that has been released, and now the law says we have to use it starting February 24th of this year, 2020. This form is the I-944 Declaration of Self-Sufficiency. If you're joining us from somewhere else, like one of the Facebook groups, or from Prima.Law, or from UnitedImmigrationLawyers.org, again, welcome as well. What I've done is I've gone through, and we're going to go through the instructions sort of step by step and go over the major items that they're asking for. I also prepared a checklist so you can use that in your practice. Let's begin. There we go. Okay, so again, the I-944, it's a brand new form. It's called the Declaration of Self-Sufficiency. This has to do with the enforcement of the public charge ground of inadmissibility. So we all know that the president said, we're going to be tough on immigrants. We don't want them to be taking all our money and our job, blah, 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 blah. So he said, we only want people who aren't going to be public charges to be coming to the U.S. Now, the fact of the matter is that's the law. It's been the law for many years. There's already a form that we use to enforce that. It's called the I-864. Again, for the Bellas, you know that. And for attorneys, you've dealt with this for sure before as well. But this is tightening up the requirements. So this is looking at more criteria than is provided for really in the statute because there's so much discretion given to USCIS. Now, this form is required when you're filing adjustment of status with USCIS. It's not required when you're doing consular processing. You'll continue to use the I-864 for that. Now, when using this with USCIS, this is in addition to the I-864. So it doesn't replace that requirement. It just adds a new requirement to it. Now, this applies with a lot of adjustments, but not all of them. Okay, so when you're doing an adjustment, that I-485, if it's for a U visa adjustment, so someone who had a U visa and now they're adjusting their status, or if it was a T visa and now it's an adjustment based on that, or a VAWA case, or a special immigrant juvenile status case, or an asylum case, it's not going to count with that. We'll go over some of the specifics later, but just beware this isn't for every single adjustment of status out there. It's only for the ones where the public charge ground of inadmissibility applies. So think about it like this. If someone's a victim of something, or if they got some humanitarian form of relief, like I said with asylum or VAWA, then you don't need to worry about this because that public charge ground of inadmissibility doesn't apply. All right, how long is it going to take to fill out this form? According to USCIS estimates, which are published online, it could take 4.5 hours of time to do this. Now, in talking with other immigration attorneys and looking at it myself, I doubt you're going to complete it in that amount of time unless the client comes to you with all the documentation already. This could easily add 6 to 8 hours of time on your case. Bill for it accordingly. We'll talk about that a little more later. But there's a lot of potential exhibits that your clients are going to need to bring for this, or that you might need to help your clients bring, or that you have to prove that they tried to get it, but they couldn't get it because it doesn't exist, and now you've got some other document to prove that it didn't exist. All right? So what does the 944 ask? Well, here's a link to it. You can go to this page. That's where I found the instructions, which I broke up and put into these different slides here to go over with you, but it's a lot. All right, so here's the purpose. This, again, is dealing with the public charge ground of inadmissibility. No big surprise here. Essentially, an alien is inadmissible, an immigrant is inadmissible under 212A4 if they're more likely than not at any time in the future to receive one or more public benefits for 12 months in the aggregate with any 36-month period. Now, that is so subjective and so difficult really to even prove, because if you could exactly prove, yes, I'm likely to receive benefits, but it's likely only going to be for 11.5 months, then they wouldn't run afoul of this regulation. But I think we can all agree to some degree this is political nonsense, but that's what the inadmissibility ground states. So who must file it? We talked about this a little bit. If you're filing for adjustment of status, if you're filing the I-485, and if the public charge ground of inadmissibility applies in that type of case. Again, where doesn't it apply? I'll show you. If you're a VAWA petitioner, special immigrant juvenile, certain Afghan or Iraqi national, an asylee, a refugee, U visa recipient, and this what was it? Under any category under the 245M, but you are invalid non-U immigrant status at the time you file. If you're it would be a T visa recipient, so a human trafficking victim. Cuban Adjustment Act for battered spouses and children. Haitian Refugee Immigrant Fairness Act. All these here. Lautenberg Paroles, Indo-Chinese Parole Act, etc., etc., etc. NACARA. Okay, so that's included there. All right, here's some considerations. They go over this in the instructions very specifically. They say a photocopy of a handwritten signature is okay with this form. They'll consider it. You must submit all evidence with the form. So I don't know if this means they're not going to do any RFEs. They'll just deny it. Or they may just end up making a negative decision based on the information they have. So not a good opportunity for submitting what you have and just waiting to see if you get RFE'd. Send everything that would apply. Again, I put together a checklist. I'm adding it to wherever you're going to be able to see this. So you can use that, craft it however you like, but it has all the requirements there. Copies of any evidence are okay unless an original is specifically requested. If you send an original, they will destroy it immediately upon receiving it, because what they do is they scan it in and then they have no need for the original and they don't want to send it back to you. So make sure you have multiple originals or don't send originals. Translations are required. So like any document that's submitted to USCIS, if a translation is required, make sure you submit it. Make sure it's certified by someone who writes that certification language. I'm competent to perform this certification between this language and this language, and I have done it, and it's attached. They want it filled out in black ink, so throw away the blue pens. Time for black pens only. And it says use addendums when needed. There's going to be a lot of information they ask for where you might actually need an addendum. If you use Prima Facie, we have a very nice addendum feature in there. If a field doesn't have an answer or doesn't apply, don't leave it blank. You must enter N/A. And it specifically says if the question requires an answer which is 0, don't write in 0, write in none. Why they would do that, it makes no sense as far as data collection goes, but go forward. All right, so on this form, they talk about the household size. They want to know how many people are in the household. This, of course, is for calculating how much they want to see that you or your sponsor or whoever earns in order to support at 125% of the poverty level. If you're 21 years of age or older, or under the age of 21 and married, these are the people you would list in your household. So you, your spouse, if they physically reside with you, your children who are under 21 and unmarried who physically reside with you, your other children who are under 21, not physically residing with you, but you provide at least 50% of financial support. And then, of course, be sure to grab a copy of the child support order, child custody agreement, and any other of those court documents to prove that. They're not going to take your word for it anymore. Any other individuals who are in the house and to whom you provide at least 50% of that individual's financial support who are listed as a dependent on your federal income tax. However, I did mess up when I spoke that. It doesn't look like it's required that they live with you. So if they're listed on your tax returns and you provide at least 50% of the support, then you got to list them as a household member. And any individual who provides to you at least 50% of your financial support or who lists you as a dependent on their federal income tax return. All right, we're going to go through some of these kind of quickly here. So that's the situation if you're 21 or older or under 21 and married, use that list. Otherwise, if you're a child under the age of 21 and unmarried, you use this list. Okay, let's talk about household finances. So the government really wants to know what kind of assets your household has. So they're not judging you just on income right now. You don't have to just provide this if you don't have enough income. Everybody has to provide this. Well, every immigrant has to provide this, okay? Every applicant who's an immigrant. So your assets and financial resources are factors they will consider. List your household members annual gross income from the most recent federal tax returns. Federal income tax returns, if any. So they're going to include the gross income, and it should be 125% of the poverty line, or 100% if you're on active duty other than in training in the U.S. Armed Forces. And if it's less than 125%, you can demonstrate the value of your household's assets and resources is 5 times the difference between. This is the same test that we use with the I-864 when you need to use assets, okay? So the total value of your household assets are 5 times the difference. So 5 times what you lack to be at that 125% of the federal poverty guidelines. And of course, it's 100% if you're on active duty other than training in the U.S. Armed Forces. And here's the requirements if you're the spouse or child of a U.S. citizen. Different ones if you're an orphan who will be adopted in the U.S. All right, which brings us to this really good point. For anyone whose income you're including in the household, this would be whether or not they're included on the I-864. You need their federal tax return transcript, not the account transcript. You want the federal tax return transcript for each of the last, how many does it say? For the most recent tax year. Yeah, so it says the most recent tax year. You know, it doesn't cost anything else to get the 3 most recent ones. May be good to have those on hand in case you need them, or in case you need to show that there was some dramatic, emergency in the meantime. All right, I'm going to keep things moving along here. So how do you get those? Go to irs.gov. You can help your client obtain those there. You can also obtain them by filing a 4506T. It's an IRS form. Fill it out. Make sure you do it right. Have it sent to your office so it doesn't get lost. Okay, looks like those don't have to be certified, which is nice. A plain transcript is acceptable, but those, again, go to the irs.gov website. You can either request it online. Now, I'm suspecting that for many immigrants or for migrants who maybe didn't use a legitimate social security number, they may not be able to get these, or if they were only using an ITIN, it may not be available online, in which case you can request that they send it through the mail. It's going to take probably 7 to 15 days to get that, but you need to do it. All right. Now, what about when you're like in between tax years? If you file this between January 1st and April 15th, and your household members have not yet filed their current income tax, submit the transcripts for the most recent tax year, and then be prepared at the interview to bring updated ones. Now, they also ask for income tax transcripts that you submit to any foreign government in the last year. So be prepared to bring those. Now, that requirement really only kicks in if you didn't file a U.S. tax return because you filed that one instead. So then bring that foreign tax return transcript or whatever the foreign equivalent is. Okay, here's an important one. If you're a child under 21 and are listed as dependent on your parents' taxes, list the total income from their tax return and submit their IRS tax transcripts. Now, if you weren't required to file a federal income tax return, then you have to bring your Social Security statement. Assuming you have one, which they may not. If you don't have that, then they say, well, just bring whatever other documents that prove if you were making income, right? And now here's the tricky one. They ask about additional income. If you received any additional income on a continuing weekly, monthly, or annual basis for the most recent tax year, and the income was not included in your or your household member's tax return transcript, provide that income here. Now, careful, what are they looking for? If you're getting any kind of income, it should be showing up on your income tax return because the IRS and the U.S. government will tax you on any accession to wealth. So any claim you have on wealth or income, they have the right to tax you on. So if your client is dealing drugs, you may have a situation to deal with, okay? Or if they have any illegal income, you want to be careful of making that admission here. I certainly wouldn't recommend admitting to a crime on a government form. Also, right. Okay, so it could be a source inside or outside of the United States. So any other income, right? But things like if you're getting paid child support in the U.S. or unemployment benefits or anything like that, this should be accounted for already. Child support. You know what? Actually, I'm not 100% on that. I think when you pay child support, your spouse doesn't get. And it's not like they get a 1099 for it. They might get a document from the state if they're receiving it through the state. So at the very least, look into that in your states. Just make sure that any income your client has either is reported on the tax return or it doesn't need to be because it's child support, but you're declaring it here. And then, of course, you need evidence of that other income. So any receipts, maybe? I don't know. Don't list income from public benefits. They cover that in a different section. All right, they want to look at your household's assets and resources. List the assets that can be converted into cash within 12 months. So if you're growing trees on a tree farm and you can't harvest them in 12 months or turn it into cash in 12 months, that may be difficult. Although I suppose you could sell the whole tree farm within 12 months, and then that would be cash. Anyway, for anything that you can turn into cash, if there's a dollar amount like on a retirement account or a financial asset, okay, those are easy. You got the cash value there stated. If it's something that doesn't have a dollar value immediately attached to it, something like a piece of property, a collection, a house, real estate, things like that, you're going to need to find a good way to get the value of that. And we go over that in a second. But long and the short of it, you need a licensed appraisal for that item. And then you have to pay for the appraisal, and you have to submit that. Okay, if you own a home, you can include the net value of the home as an asset, which is the appraised value of the home. You got to get a licensed appraisal. You can't just go off the tax value or anything like that, minus any liabilities. So any debts or mortgages on the house. So if it's a house that appraises for $1 million and you owe $900,000 on it, then you can use $100,000 of net value as an asset. But you got to pay for an appraisal, and those are not always cheap. We talked about that. All right, planes, trains, and automobiles. You can't use one vehicle. If you only have one vehicle in the household, you cannot use that as a value. I guess the thinking is everybody needs a vehicle, and it's probably not worth much anyway. But if you have a second vehicle, you can use the second vehicle, the net value of the second vehicle, as an asset. So you need proof of the total number of vehicles in the household, and prove that you haven't used one as an asset. So here's a trick. Here's a legitimate legal strategy. If you have a car that's worth a lot and you want to use it, go buy some $500 hoopty, put a title and registration on it and insurance, park it in the driveway. You'll claim that that's the one that you're not using, and then all of a sudden, if you've got a car that's worth, $10,000, $20,000, you can then use that one to establish some more higher value for assets. So it's a fun little strategy you might want to try if you need to, if you're in a pinch. Just go get a really cheap car somewhere else and title it. Asset value. Okay. So if you have any assets that you're submitting the value for, things like this, make sure you include this information, right? A description of the asset, proof of ownership, and the basis for the owner's claim of its net cash value. So if you need an appraisal, get that. But things like checking accounts, savings accounts, annuities, stocks, bonds, retirement accounts, blah, blah, blah. All these things have a dollar value attached to them, so you should not need an appraisal for those. Print it off and show what the net present value of the cash is, and you should be okay. But as I was preparing this, a thought came to my mind, and the thought was, well, what if you borrow somebody else's account? No, don't borrow assets. People did this sort of thing where they were borrowing someone's employment history and paying farmers for fake letters back in the late 80s under the agricultural worker program. So it would say, oh yeah, you worked here for at least these many months, when they'd never really worked there at all. Everybody got in trouble. A lot of people went to jail. And a lot of people ended up being denied green cards and permanently barred or barred for fraud. Don't get involved with that. So when you're dealing with the clients, make sure that you're reviewing those statements. If there's anything that looks fishy, bring it to the attention of the attorney, because you don't want somebody borrowing somebody else's checking account or borrowing somebody else's stocks, bonds, or annuities or other assets like that. All right, bank accounts. If it's in a bank account, here's why the asset borrowing program doesn't work on bank accounts, because you got to approve statements for the last 12 months prior to filing the application. So get the statements for the last 12 months. Does Bitcoin count? Probably not, and you don't want to publish the Bitcoin wallet address, because then whoever's working in the government can steal it from you. So don't do that. You need information from the clients about liabilities. Now, liabilities is just a fancy accountant way of saying debts, money you owe. So provide a list of all the immigrants' liabilities or debts. So we're talking something that you're under an obligation to pay. Could be child support, could be credit card debt, could be a car loan, any unpaid taxes, any loans, any student loans, any foreclosures, evictions, any court orders that you have to pay, any money that you owe to the IRS. I really hope we don't have anyone like that, because I'll bet they get denied. And then, again, for all of those, provide documentation. Names, addresses, who holds it, when was the last payment, when is it due, all of those things. Total dollar amount outstanding, you're going to need to gather that. Oh, and the fun. The fun continues on credit reports. You need to obtain a copy of the credit report for your client. Now, if it's available. So what does that mean? Thinking about all of the clients that you have, or you may have, many of them may not have a very legitimate Social Security number. So there is an open question that I don't really have the answer for right now, but do they have a credit report? If you don't have a Social Security number, how are you going to have a credit report? Like I said, it's an open question. Might need to look into it. Now, what I would suggest in this situation is go request the credit report, put in your client's information, just disclose the fact they don't have a Social Security number, and then hopefully you get a letter back, or I don't know if it's going to pop up on the webpage and say, no, we couldn't find anything for this person. Great, take a screenshot of that, submit that. That's your evidence saying that you don't have a credit report or a credit score. If you don't have a credit report or a credit score, you can provide a copy of a Social Security statement, but chances are you don't have that because you don't have a legitimate Social Security number. You can also submit evidence of paying your bills. So why would the government even ask for that? I mean, it's just rot for people to make stuff. You could easily make stuff up, right? But anyways, tell your client, hey, all right, show me that you pay a monthly gas bill. Show me that you pay a monthly electric bill. Show me that you pay Netflix each month. Show me that you pay whatever each month, and have those things ready to go. Receipts for multiple months showing that everything's in good standing and being paid. As far as credit reports, you can get your client a free one at this link here. They can get one free annual report. You only need one credit report, so you might pull all three and see which one looks more favorable and submit that one. If there are any if there's any errors on the credit report, make sure you disclose that. If there's any negative history, you want to be able to explain that. Oh, I got sick. Wife got cancer. This happened, that happened. Okay, there's ways to explain those things. Prove that you've tried to, maybe resolve it or whatever. Anything that's going to make your client look a little better, you want to include in a written explanation about each negative item. I would think even a table would be a good idea, to just create a table of all negative history items and reference that in your exhibits. It sounds like this is the type of form that's going to need a brief to go with it, to be honest. Just with all the different items and addendums that you're going to have to provide, maybe we should put out just a template for a brief that goes over all this. Okay, here we go. Bankruptcy, this is probably going to be a negative. No, it's for sure going to be a negative mark. If your client has filed for bankruptcy ever, anywhere in the universe, because it doesn't say just in the U.S., make sure you list all this information, all times, the type, place of filing, the date of bankruptcy, and evidence of the resolution of the bankruptcy case. That brings us to health insurance. Boy, this is 25 minutes already. Okay, health insurance. So part of being a public charge is the government wants you to have health insurance when you enter the U.S. because they don't want you to use public benefits. So here we go. Provide this information if you have health insurance already. You can help your client obtain health insurance. I found a provider. They're based in Florida, but they can help anyone in the U.S. emglobalinsurance.com. I met with them. They're very nice. I think they could do a good job. So you can work with them. And they were nice enough to sponsor the Central Florida Chapter Annual Conference. All right. Now, USCIS is going to review the medical examination report. And if there's anything on there that's like a serious health concern, they can now, apparently, they can discriminate against an applicant based on their health status. So if there's anything negative in the health history, explain it, explain how they get treatment, how it's not going to be a public charge, how the person's going to be recovering, or if they can't recover, how treatment can be ongoing and paid for, not at public expense. And with that, you can include treating physician letters and additional evidence. So definitely take advantage of that. Talking about public benefits again, if your client ever applied for or received, you need to have proof of those things. Okay, so see if you can get a copy of the application. If they actually received public benefits, get a copy of the statement for that, show when it was received. It's actually something where you need to sort of establish this is when they started, this is when it ended. In total, they received approximately this, and et cetera, et cetera. They want a more complete history of these things now with the I-944. Talking about benefits, they ask about these specific things, about these specific programs here, so definitely review those. All right, if the benefits were received before October 15th, 2019, you only need to report SSI, cash, TANF, general assistance, and benefits received for long-term institutionalization. You don't need to report the other stuff. Why? It was excluded from consideration under the guidance in place before that date, so it won't be considered if received only before October 15th. If you received public benefits afterwards, you have to include proof of all of those things. All right. Now, this is a little confusing, so stay with me. To the extent that states give the same name to their federal Medicaid program and the state-only funded health insurance program, aliens will not be required to report the receipt of the state-only funded health insurance. So if it's a state public benefit, you don't need to report the health insurance for that portion of it. If it's federal, you need to report that portion of it, yes. All right, and certain people are excluded from having to report public benefits. I'm not going to go through the table completely here just because there's a lot of information. Yeah, let's go through it. All right, so if they're a U.S. Armed Forces service member and at the time the benefit was received, they were, in these statuses, the spouse or someone actually enlisted in the U.S. Armed Forces, then you got to submit this information on the right column here. And if it was federally funded Medicaid and it was received, by anyone in these circumstances here, then here's the evidence you need there. And the chart continues on this page too. So if you're a child acquiring U.S. citizenship, just the evidence you need to submit is this in the right-hand column, that you're someone who's going to be like automatically a citizen upon entering the U.S. And for people who receive public benefits while in an immigration category exempt from public charge, like asylum or refugee status, then category on the right, bring those documents to prove. All right, now if you've ever received any public benefits, or if you're certified to receive benefits in the future, then you need proof from the agency who's going to give you those benefits with this information: name, contact information, type of benefit, date you were authorized to start, and when it expires, if applicable. Now, here's a tricky little gem. If your client ever received an immigration filing fee waiver, They want to know about it because now they're going to look suspiciously and say, oh, well, why did you apply for a fee waiver before? Were you poor? Obviously, that's why people get fee waivers. And even though it was USCIS who approves the fee waiver, they're revisiting it here apparently. So you're going to need information on that if they've applied for or received a fee waiver. Okay, now you may have heard the president talk about how we only want people with skills. It's kind of like the Napoleon Dynamite. The country only wants people with skills, like ninja skills, computer hacking skills. Well, here we want to know about the education of your client and any skills that they might have, which would be high school, college, if there's any occupational skills that they have. You're going to need that information. Now, important point, even if you're not applying based on an I-140, so an employment petition, you're going to need a foreign education equivalency evaluation to be performed on any post-high school education. Here's a link to a place that does those real well. I've used them before. I was very happy with their service. They were quick. It's Morningside Evaluations. So morningeval.com is where you can find that. When we talk about the occupational skills, provide some proof. A certificate, a certification, licensing, any other proof or documentation of a course or class or training that they've had. Of course, it all has to be translated in English too. If they've ever did like an apprenticeship or a journeyman thing or anything like that, they need to bring proof of it. All right. When talking about education and skills, I also want to know about English and other language skills. So get this. Even if your client is a native English speaker and speaks English better than you or I do, they still need to prove it. So they need to bring like a high school diploma or its equivalent from overseas. They need to show that they've studied their own language for credit, right? So if you took high school English over in England or something like that, that would count. Other than that, how do you prove that you speak your own language fluently? You could have them provide a handwritten letter, I suppose, that they do themselves. If there's any other language certifications, include that in there. Yikes. All right, if they're retired, include information on their retirement. Are they getting regular income from a retirement plan or pension? Make sure that's included. And it looks like they want the date of retirement as well. All right, so what does this all mean? Look, it means we got to get good at collecting credit reports. We need to get good at collecting health information, health insurance information. We need to be good on referring to people who can sell them health insurance, which is like a legitimate and a good plan. We need information on previous public benefits for themselves. We need information on tax return transcripts. We need to gather all those things reliably from the IRS and the other branches of government. If they ever had any public benefits, we got to get good at requesting those documents or getting our clients to request those documents from the public agency that gave it to them. There's just so much documentation in here that we need to get good at getting. Next slide. Okay. Also means that this is going to take more time to complete. Now, hopefully I've convinced you just by the 34 minutes that we spent on this video so far. And of course, I've been talking kind of fast. I hope you can follow along. But what this means is it's going to take more time to complete. You're going to need to charge clients more when you're doing an adjustment of status that requires the I-944. There's no way around it. Now, there's things you can do to limit how much of your personal time it's going to take. May I suggest Bella Legal Assistants, who are trained immigration paralegals who can help you complete all of this type of casework. They take that off of your plate, right? So if you want to limit the cost to your client, hire one of our Bellas. They can help you either on a case-by-case basis or on a part-time or full-time basis as well. Ultimately, you'll be able to charge less than your hourly rate because you're having a paralegal do it. So that's one way to limit costs and to take some of the hassle just out of the gathering and the processing and the follow-up. There's easily 30 or 40 documents here that you might need to gather on a difficult case. Do you want to personally be following up on them? Probably not. The other thing you can do is just consider are you using a case management system that helps you with this? I have created a checklist. I am adding it to a case types inside Prima Facie. So, if you use Prima, it's going to be integrated in there already. If not, there's a checklist. We're going to publish it for you as well that we've drafted based on the instructions here. So it's just going to take more time. So make sure you're charging enough. Make sure that you pass the blame onto the president or the administration here, and just explain to your client, look, here's the deal. Now, if you're smart, you already have it in your retainer agreement. If you don't have it in there, you should have had it months ago. Add a clause. Costs do not include any unanticipated changes in the law, documentation, or form requirements or revisions. You throw that in there, that'll save you. So you can sit down with the client and say, look, here's the deal. Things changed. We couldn't anticipate that it was going to happen. We didn't know when it was going to come into effect, if it was going to at all. We thought the courts might have been able to block it. Here's the deal. I got to do all this extra work. I want you to collaborate. I want you to bring me these things. I got to charge a little extra because of that, but you can keep the cost down if you bring it to me. So you can put some of that on the client as well. All right. We're at 36 and a half minutes. I'm going to end this right now. Thank you for joining us. Again, this video is sponsored by three things. One, Bella University, where we have training videos for immigration attorneys and their paralegals. It's sponsored by Bella Legal Assistants, it's our company of paralegals that work remotely, that will do all this casework and follow-up for you. And also by Prima Facie, our company for immigration case management software. All right. Thanks for joining us. Enjoy the new form.